I'm a fan of Family Matters, but you know what? I know you from Young and the Restless because my mom watches it all the time. When I first seen you on it, I was like, that guy looks familiar, but I couldn't put my tongue on it. And then when I looked up the facts, I was like, oh, that's who he is.
Yeah, most people don't remember me from that show, and I don't blame anyone because I think I look pretty different. All my hair's gone.
So we're going to do things a little bit differently this time. Usually we go with the beginning of your career to the end because it's usually the format that we do, but because I want to hype up the Family Matters one because I have more questions on Family Matters, let's start by talking about The Young and the Restless. How did you land your role on The Young and the Restless?
Just the same way anybody does, just with auditioning. I had taken a break from doing any kind of auditioning for a couple of years, and then when I was about 16, 17, I got a small agent and just started going back out. The first audition for a TV show was Young and the Restless. And, I remember that day I had an audition for a Coca-Cola commercial, the soap, and I really, really wanted the Coke commercial because it was a big national commercial, and I never thought in a million years that I was going to get the soap opera because all I really knew about them was my mom would watch General Hospital every day my life growing up, so I just would hear and see all these crazy stories going on in the background. And I went on the audition, and halfway through the read, the casting director stopped me and praised the way I was reading the role, and I went on one callback and then one screen test, and then within a week I was on the show.
Now, looking back on it, are you glad that you're on the show and not that Coke commercial?
Absolutely. I'm very, very happy it worked out the way it did.
I want to ask this because, of course, like I said, I don't really watch it as much, but was your character at one point deaf?
Yeah. About 2 or 3 years into being on the show, my character got meningitis, passed out, and was in the hospital, and when I woke up, he had complete hearing loss, which could be one of the results of that. And he was completely deaf, I think, for about 4 or 5 months of the show. And then they wrote that my character got this thing called a cochlear implant, which is sort of like a hearing aid device. And I wore that for about 5 years on the show, and then had another surgery where they internalized all the technology. It actually caught up in real life, so they put that in the show. And so now I have my full hearing back without having to wear any devices or anything like that.
Okay. Now, with speaking with this, I'm a wrestling fan, so I can't really throw too much heat at soap opera stars. But when you're watching wrestling, some of the stuff that they do, you're like, nah, it wouldn't happen in real life. With soap operas, it's like characters die, they come back, and then there's different scenarios of but I thought he was gone. Do you ever look at a script and think, I can't believe I'm doing this? Why is my character going through this process?
Well, not me personally, speaking only for my character, because the situation I just explained with the losing my hearing and all that, that's all real. That there was nothing exaggerated or fantasy about that. That was, they actually had to wait till real life technology caught up with the storylines they wanted to write for my character to make it accurate. A lot of the storylines I've done have been, they've been not too crazy storylines, not too unbelievable or anything like that. They've been very relatable, real kind of things to have to act out. But definitely across the board, see some storylines being played out. But our show, I think, has been pretty good about not doing to make people stretch their imagination too much.
No, that's good. Sometimes when I'm looking back at some episodes and whatnot, it's like that character died in a house fire, and they said he was dead, and yet he's back 3 years later. And I'm looking at it, and I'm going to my mom, how do you watch this? And then she'll look at me and be like, how do you watch wrestling? So I'm like, okay, it's fair.
I think everybody watches TV or film or entertainment to, to escape just a little bit and have it be something that stretches their reality from the day to day.
Yeah, for sure. That's why, that's why when I was younger, I used to watch The Boy Meets World, Full House, Family Matters. It just seemed like a simpler time. Now, one of the things I found interesting, and it's going to kind of sway into the Family Matters discussion a bit here, but you are friends with the character named Lily on The Young and the Restless. I think her name is
Crystal Blue.
And she was also in Family Matters as well, so that's a long-running relationship right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were about 9 and 7 years old when we first met. When Family Matters came out on Hulu, I got to go back and find the exact episode. I think it's episode 8 in the 8th season, called Karate Kids, and you can see both of us there. And Yeah, it's crazy. That's when we first met. And the studio teacher, actually, who was on Family Matters at the time, who was my teacher from 3 years old till the end of the show, is the same studio teacher that handles all the kids on Young and the Restless, which is a very nice coincidence when I got on the show.
I also looked up a little bit about her, and I used to watch That's So Raven, and she was on an episode of That's So Raven as well with Orlando. So I was like, there you go. There's another reunion from the Family Matters. Have you or Orlando ever been in a film or TV other than Family Matters?
No, I don't think so.
Do you guys still interact?
No, I haven't spoken to Orlando, I don't think, since in the show ended. I may have seen him. I mean, that show ended in '98, so it was a little bit ago. So I don't think I've run into him. I ran into Raven once in that time at the NAACP Awards, and her and I were pretty close growing up because she filmed Hang with Mr. Cooper on the lot too before she was doing obviously That's So Raven, and we used to do a lot of charity work together.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, speaking of charity work, I read that you were also involved. Of course, there's Mothers Against Drunk Driving, but you also created your own sort of thing against drunk driving. Do you want to explain that a little bit more and how that came to be?
Yeah. It was actually the youth division of RAD, which is Recording Artists, Actors, and Athletes Against Drunk Driving. Ours was called RAD Kids. And in '96, I believe, the adult division asked if I would be in a music video they were doing for Paul McCartney was doing Baby You Can Drive My Car, and they had me in that video. And then my father had thought of an idea to create this youth program. We got to over, I think, 75 different kids at that time who were on other TV shows and films, and we would go around, travel around the country, partner up with other organizations, and speak to youth about safety, making safe choices. Because we couldn't talk about drinking and driving to underage kids, but you can talk about not getting in a car with someone who's been, drinking and wearing your seatbelt, things like that. Was there like a particular interest that you got involved in that, or? Well, when I first was asked to do the video, it was something fun that for me back then, and I think it was something important for my parents to have me involved in because it kept me around positive influences and messages and taught me about utilizing an influence that I had from my job to do good.
I read that you were doing auditions at the age of 2 or 3. You auditioned for Family Matters. Obviously you got the part, otherwise, who is this Bryton James character we're talking to? But take me through that audition. And that audition came about in a really crazy way because I was 3 years old, and my mother and I had just flown to Oklahoma to visit my great-grandmother. The same day we got there, my father called my mom and said that I had an audition, and this was for Family Matters, and I had never auditioned for a TV show before. We had a trip planned for a little over a week in Oklahoma, and my mom really didn't know what to do. We had just gotten into this industry, and they didn't know anything about it, and I had been getting lucky and, getting a couple commercials here and there, but, it was a big thing to just throw away your plane tickets, and eventually my mom made that decision, and we came back. I remember only vague parts of it. I remember being in the room. I think I'm pretty sure I sang Michael Jackson and danced in there. And then I had one call back, and then the next week I was on the show. Nice, because you know what? I was just going to reference that because there are parts of when you're a little bit older in the series that, you do break out the Michael Jackson dance moves and whatnot. Oh, yeah. With even Christmas coming close, I always remember, I watch it constantly, and especially the Christmas episodes I like, but the one line that I still think is a classic line to this day is when Urkel says, you were looking for a Freddy Teddy, and Urkel said, well, did you have were you a good boy or something the year? And you were like, I had a good August. I had a pretty good August. Yeah. And I still think that's hilarious because, no one came, from that, you always hear repetitive lines in movies or TVs, but, that one to me was so original. What were some of your favorite moments of that TV show? Oh, man. It's hard to pick just one because I always had a great time. There was never a day, and I'm so lucky. I always say this to everybody. I'm so lucky that I never
expressed being tired or like not wanting to do it or not wanting to have to memorize my lines or be there or wake up. I never did, because I know my parents would have stopped me from doing it. You know, the entire process was great. I mean, getting to some of the crazy episodes, I remember being hooked up to harnesses because of some of Urkel's, crazy inventions. Seeing how, I remember at that age, the coolest part was seeing how things were made, so that when I watched TV and movies when I went home, I saw it completely differently at such a young age. I remember being 4 years old and then seeing, I think, the episode where Eddie got beat up by the dragon at Rachel's place, and his face was pretty, beat up, and they did a great makeup job with these bruises and cuts and stuff. And I remember being 4 years old, seeing him close up and thinking it was real for a second, and then learning, oh wow, that stuff that you see is fake, and I got to touch it and feel it, So it allowed me to see entertainment differently growing up, which was, I think, cool. It was fun for me. I learned a lot of cool stuff, like riding a bike, around around Warner Brothers lot, where I got to see, the Batmobile driving around and people in costumes and characters. I think George Clooney, they did ER next door to us, so George Clooney would be playing basketball outside during lunch, and Will Smith, they did Fresh Prince not too far away, so Will would come and visit Jaleel.
Nice.
Pretty often they played basketball. So, there was a lot of great, memories and experiences. Hard to pick just one.
Yeah, because I was just looking about how you just said, like, you were taking it all in and you learned things on the fly as well. Like, I used to actually think that Full House was in L.A. or San Francisco, and Boy Meets World was in Philly, and this was in Chicago. And then when I find out that, like, all of it is pretty much the same, like, I looked at TMZ's earlier one, and I think Reginald even admits, he's like, I've never been to Chicago. I was like, no. You should have said that. Yeah, I know. I've watched a lot of the YouTube clips of the whole Family Matters reunion, and it seems like you guys are like a close bunch. I know that you even admitted, and kudos to you for admitting it, but I'm sure if I was around the 15 mark or the 15 age mark, I'd admit it too, that you had a big crush on Laura's character.
Oh yeah, that was one of the first girls I tried to call my girlfriend.
Even I'm sure that when they were like cutting scenes, you were probably in the background going like, "Hey Laura, come over! I got my juice box ready."
You have no idea. There were at the end of have a wrap party for the crew, for all the crew in the cast, and they would put together a blooper reel, but they did a really great production, because they would film like additional scenes to transition to different clips and voice over it and put music to it, and so they did a really great job. And almost on all the old ones, you could catch me either winking or making some kind of googly eyes across scenes to Kelly.
Yeah, no, I just thought that was interesting, because I can imagine being like 7 or 8 on set and seeing her. That I'm guessing she was like maybe 15 or 16 at the time, and you're just there like looking over and being like, Jaleel, like let me get this in this scene, and he's looking at you like, no, like we got characters to develop. Speaking of Jaleel White, I also heard in one of the interviews that you did that you give Jaleel a lot of credit and for coming into his role as Urkel and really carrying the show at such a young age. Do you think it was hard for him to do that?
Well, if it was, I think he didn't show it because he did such a great job. I don't think any of it ever got to him. But I could only imagine. I couldn't imagine, because unless you're in that position, what that was like. I heard, even in the reunion, I heard a lot of stories that he said about, having to play some of the characters and what he was going through, mentally when he was having to do it. It was education for me. But yeah, he was a teenager, and the show was supposed to be canceled. It wasn't doing well enough in the ratings, and then in the first season, and then his character, revived the show. And it's I think for anybody, it's a lot of eyes all on you. But he did an amazing job. He's an iconic television actor.
Yeah, like even to this day, I mean, he carries himself pretty well, because, I mean, it's no offense to Jaleel, but like a lot of kid actors or teen actors, like they get remembered for one role and then they go down a dark path. Like I remember there used to be a hoax that he killed himself, and his death letter said, "Did I do that?" And I was like, I really hope that's not true. Like I could see it being true, but he carries himself pretty well.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever worried about him going down a path like that. I mean, he was always a pretty, strong person. So.
I know that you were pretty young doing the show, but there was one casualty that did happen on the show. Of course, it kind of happened after the show was over, but Michelle Thomas, who played... She did great in her role on the show, playing Mira. What are your thoughts on her?
Oh, I mean, from what I could remember, she was always a pleasure to be around on set. She was one of the nicest people, and she kept what she had been going through really away from everyone. No one knew, that she had been suffering from anything. So it was definitely a surprise and a shock when she passed. But it was tragic. She was an exceptional actress. She played that character perfectly and brought so much to the show, and an even better person. So
now, just to kind of give you an insight of just how, like you mentioned, her being an iconic role, but just how iconic the show was. It says that it became the second longest running non-animated U.S. sitcom, with the predominantly African American cast behind only The Jeffersons. And then it's also saying that having aired 215 episodes, it's ranked third behind only Tyler Perry's House of Pain, which I don't understand that at all. And of course, and The Jeffersons. I feel like you guys got to do a reunion. You got to pass Tyler Perry's House of Pain. There's no way that can be first.
Well, they do a lot of work. I've heard about production on their shows, and take my hat off to how much the volume that they produce. But I would absolutely love to do a reunion. When we were just doing the Entertainment Weekly shoot, that's really what was on the tip of everybody's tongue and what we were talking about. And because a lot of us hadn't seen each other in almost 20 years, it was really like we had never left. And everybody's in good health, and we would absolutely love the opportunity. And I think there's definitely a market, and there's definitely enough people who would be willing to tune in.
Now, the tough question I'm going to ask on that one as well is, we've seen revivals of Boy Meets World going Girl Meets World. We've seen Full House turn into Fuller House. I'm just wondering, would it be great if Family Matters came back? Because it seems like these revivals kind of die out, and where would your focus be? Because when we left it was more or less focused on Urkel and Laura, and I'm sure, judging by Jo Mary Patton when she was doing her interview, it seemed like they wanted the more focus to be on the family. So how would that even work if you had an idea?
Well, I mean, if this is solely as you're asking, but it's my idea, because those things are completely left up to the writers and producers. And I would hope actually that a lot of our producers who are still around and actively writing would be part of a project if it were ever to come around. But I think that Family Matters was, it's centered around, I think, the relationship between Reginald VelJohnson and Harriet and Jaleel. And so I think that, and obviously there was always the push and pull of Urkel and Laura. So I think to satisfy some people, I don't know, I would see probably Jaleel and Laura together, but Jaleel not as Urkel, and they probably have a kid who's, maybe having to deal with, if you want to make it current and relevant, you can put some, bullying into it and have them be sort of the similar type character of what Jaleel was,
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's so many different ways you can go because it's a big family. So
it's funny because the way I look at it too is, I grew up on Boy Meets World, Full House, Family Matters, and the reason that I really like those shows is that it got you, even when you were young, it brought in some serious matters that I don't think there's a lot of shows doing today. Like, I know when I was probably 5 or 6, the one that you guys were doing on the Chicago shootings and about gun control. As a 6-year-old, I wasn't really interested. I was more or less interested in being like, okay, show's over. They're just doing a promo. This is stupid. But now when I'm looking at it at like 26, I'm saying that's still going on. Like, that's still relevant today.
Absolutely, and I think as many shows as there could be to bring light to important issues and also just things that are relatable, things that families and people go through.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Bryton James for coming on the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying, thanks for listening, and good night.